Gold fever. Once you've got it, you're hooked for life. It's incurable, they say. And nothing excites gold fever faster than tales of buried treasure or lost gold mines, of outlaws' loot hidden in mountain caves. It's the old dream of something for nothing. Tonight, the story of the hidden treasure of a man named Milton Ernest Noss. His friends called him Doc. Others called him a con man. Doc Noss was killed 28 years ago in the town of Hatch, New Mexico, shot in an argument over gold. But the tale of his hidden treasure is alive and well. It is dawn at a crossroad in the New Mexico desert, 13 miles from the place Doc Noss was shot. A chilly morning, temperature 27 degrees. Question: why are these ordinarily sane and sensible people, 107 of them at last count, driving across 30 miles of spine-crunching desert track, eating dust, braving blowouts, squinting into the rising sun? Well, they're looking for gold, that's why. Looking for Doc Noss's gold.
You talk about a godforsaken place. This is it. Very little here but tumbleweed and bad sand. People got to be crazy to come out here to look for gold. And maybe you got to be a little crazier even to come here to take pictures of people looking for gold.
But, crazy or not, here we come. Not quite another Klondike, but enough to show that gold fever will make one do strange things, risking life and limb and front axles on rocky trails to get to the Hembrillo Basin and to a 500-foot hill in the middle of it called Victorio Peak, where there's supposed to be millions, some say billions, in gold. Wherever Doc Noss is now, he's probably chuckling a bit.
This is where Doc Noss said he discovered the gold. Not a gold mine, you understand, but a cavern deep in a mountain, deep in the San Andres Mountains of southern New Mexico. A cavern where there were gold bricks stacked up like cordwood, and ancient golden artifacts, and 27 human skeletons tied to posts. More gold than you can imagine, down deep inside the mountain at the end of a narrow 300-foot-long tunnel. You could only descend climbing hand over hand on a rope. The entrance to Doc Noss's fabulous cavern of gold is supposed to be somewhere around this old abandoned mine shaft. Doc's first wife, Ova Noss, put these boards down 22 years ago. So you put those boards up there.
Yeah.
Do you remember when that was?
It was when I left in '55. We locked everything up.
Now, is
Put a padlock on it.
Mm-hmm. What kind of man was Doc Noss?
He was a very generous man, and he was brilliant in his thinking ability, and he was 3/8 Cheyenne Indian. He was 5'10" and weighed 165 pounds. He was very athlete. You know, he could jump and mountain climb. He was very good at that.
Was he a talkative man or rather silent type?
Well, he'd talk. If he thought you was trying to find out his business, he talked on another subject.
He was talkative enough to Ova Noss, though. When he came to the surface after exploring at the bottom of this mine shaft, he told her he had seen a great pile of antique pig iron bars.
I begged him to bring me up a bar of it. So he finally did. And he said, that's the last one of them babies I'm ever going to carry out. I was over there and I said, well, Doc, this is yellow. Maybe this is gold. Well, his legs was trembling from straining coming up, but he come wobbling over there and he took his knife and shaved it. He said, well, babe, if that's gold, we can call John D. Rockefeller a tramp.
We'll get back to Ova Noss and to a lot of other people who are part of this story in a moment. But first, it is reasonable to ask why she hasn't already just come in here and claimed her rightful possessions. The reason is that where I'm sitting is at the very top of Victorio Peak, which is part of the U.S. Army's White Sands Missile Range. 2,000 times a year, something like this happens in the 4,000 square miles of White Sands. Since 1955, Doc Noss's treasure trove has been used as a target range for Air Force gunnery practice. The landscape is dotted with targets shot up and jettisoned. Besides, says the Army, there's nothing to look for anyway.
The Army has maintained from the beginning that there is no lost treasure in White Sands Missile Range.
That's Major Ken Abel, White Sands Public Information Officer.
The legend lives on, however.
You're certain that the location, the original location, is Victoria Peak?
I sure am.
No doubt in your mind about that.
I wouldn't hunt anywhere else.
If this is the place, it is not one where there are any streets paved with gold. There are no streets here. Not anything even remotely resembling a street. Rattlesnakes? Yes. For miles around here, there is the most forbidding terrain we've ever been in. No gold bricks to reach down and pick up here. In fact, there may not even be any gold at all.
But that's not what Norman Scott figures. He's a professional treasure hunter from Pompano Beach, Florida, the president of an outfit called Expeditions Unlimited. He has successfully dug up sunken treasure, and he convinced the Army to give him 10 days at Victoria Peak to find buried treasure. He spent several years checking out the story and finally concluded it was worth raising $75,000 to mount the effort in return for a possible profit of millions.
70 to 80, maybe even 90% of this particular rumors and legends are not based on fact. However, there still remains the point of 10, 20%. That cannot be refuted, and the preponderance of circumstantial evidence that it may be factual.
The Army, for its part, wants to get it all over with, one way or another, and get rid of all the folks who want to dig where they want to fire missiles. So here we all are, reporters and cameramen and MPs, checking to make sure no gold goes in and none goes out without the Army knowing about it. And all under the benevolent gaze of 81-year-old Ova Noss. She, of course, says that whatever Norman Scott and his crew find belongs to her, that she and Doc Noss found it and have a long-standing claim since way back before the Army took over. But there are also a lot of other people out here who say they saw it, or found it, or own it, or know exactly where it is, and will lead Scott right to it. In fact, we saw more cases of out-and-out incurable gold fever on this mountain than you could imagine. Take Joe Newman, for example. He sells carpets in El Paso. He's been inside Victoria Peak dozens of times, he says. While he's never seen the treasure trove, he's sure it's there. And it doesn't belong to Doc Noss at all. It belongs to the Apache Indian Nation. If the Apache claim stands up, Joe Newman will get half the gold in return for his help. And there's Leonard Feeney. He said he actually saw the treasure in 1958 while stationed here as an Air Force captain.
Is it a fantasy?
No.
You were in there. You saw what you told me you saw.
I physically held it in my hands. I know it was there.
Then there was a story we can honestly say took us a bit by surprise. The claim of this man, Jesse James III. That's right, grandson of the Jesse James. It seems, says young Jesse, that old Jesse wasn't killed by Bob Ford at all in 1882, that the killing was faked so that Jesse James could go underground to pursue his goal of restoring the Confederacy through a group called the Knights of the Golden Circle. The gold in Victoria Peak? Why, that was put there against the day when the South would rise again. Tony Jolly saw Doc Noss the night before Doc died. He and Doc came out here that night, he says, and moved 110 bars of gold Doc had taken out of the mountain.
Is there any possibility that you're mistaken, that your memory has played tricks on you? Or...
No way. No way.
It turned out that Tony Jolly's memory wasn't so good when it came time to look for the buried bars of gold.
And if those mothers were down there, we'd be hearing it.
All the metal detectors could find in the area where Jolly said he helped Doc Noss bury the bars 28 years ago was iron pyrites, commonly known as fool's gold.
If I can get everybody's attention, we'll make it real easy here. At 9 o'clock, Mr. Scott's going to have a press briefing on his little knoll up here.
Get the mics down a little.
At the outset, at least, the normally skeptical press corps hung on Scott's every word.
The plan is as follows. We will proceed down to the base of the canyon. We will park our vehicles.
Scott's plan was to look first near the base of Victoria Peak, at a place called the Bloody Hands. which turned out to be some faint Indian markings on the wall above a dry riverbed, supposedly pointing the way to buried treasure. But the only treasure the Indians left behind were a couple of pieces of flint and a few bits of charcoal. The search for El Dorado moved to higher ground.
Okay, the area that you see here is an area that was an entrance to a 500-foot cavern or tunnel going into Victoria Peak. And we'll attempt to take the rubble out of there, open up that tunnel, and then leading down to the bottom of Victoria Peak.
All over the mountain, holes were opened and explored and given names. Soldier's Hole, the one Figi entered. Bat Cave, Jackass Hole, Dome Room, Ring Room. Norman Scott walked into one cave early on and tore some tendons in his arm. For the rest of the search, he wore a cast and a sling and a somewhat pained expression.
Across the fall.
Scott's team found lots of evidence of tunnels, natural and man-made, and took lots of pictures that showed they weren't the first ones since Doc Noss to go into Victoria Peak looking for the gold.
All of this is dropping down at roughly about a 45-degree angle.
That Coke can was there?
That was there.
So people been in there not too long ago?
Not too long ago is right.
Does that go any further in there?
Yes, it does. It goes back up in there to another small room.
But nothing in there?
Nothing in there.
Something, I see something back in there 50 feet in. I don't know what it is, but see here? There it is. That's 50 feet in. There's nothing particularly down.
Norman Scott's ace in the hole, no pun intended, was Lambert Dolphin, a radiophysicist from the Stanford Research Institute in California. He brought a device called ground radar that could tell if there were caverns or fissures inside the mountain.
Yeah, okay, that's the only thing that's left to us now is if there's any, okay, other than natural. Maybe we got a fissure back there that's natural. Maybe nothing. Okay.
As the days dragged on and the great catch of gold eluded the treasure hunters, the pace of digging picked up, and the dust blew and blew. Hole after hole was abandoned, dead ends, closed passageways, and more it began to look like every story except the one Doc Noss had told would have to be considered inaccurate or worse.
We're sending Shirley down, find out what's down there. It's just thinking like Noss trying to think it'd be hell of a thing if he let everybody wrong, and that's really it. We'll also talk to Ova and see what she can remember.
The search concentrated finally in the original Noss shaft at the top of the peak. They found a spot 165 feet down where Doc Noss said he had accidentally dynamited the passageway shut in an effort to widen it. Ova Noss said there was 34 feet of rubble in there. Lambert Dolphin's instruments said 33 feet. Too close for coincidence. It was to be dug out by hand.
Sam Norman, what's the activity, please? Come back.
Okay, we're ready to haul our first bucket full of dirt up. It will be up in about a minute.
Scott asked the Army and was given 3 extra days to dig through the blocked passageway. But a strange thing happened. After about 8 feet, they ran out of rubble and hit virgin soil. The last dead end had been reached.
Yesterday marked the end of the search for the alleged lost treasure of Victoria Peak. This search indicates no treasure, gold or otherwise, exists in the area of Embry Basin or within Victoria Peak. White Sands Missile Range is now closed to further search.
There is the presence of a cavern, a large cavity which is at least 100 by 100 feet at the bottom, as you see in this 2-scale drawing. Doc Noss reports that there was such a cavern. You can draw your own conclusions from that. Is there gold in that cavern? We have no idea. We found no gold. Is there gold on Victoria Peak or on White Sands Missile Range? I don't know.